I was in the middle of a board presentation when my mother walked through the glass doors of my office like she owned the building. Not knocked, not called ahead, just walked in, my father 2 steps behind her, and my brother trailing after them both with that particular expression he wears when he thinks he's about to get something. I had 17 people in that room, a slide on the screen behind me showing Q3 projections. My CFO mid-sentence. I smiled, not because I was happy to see them, but because I had been waiting for exactly this moment for 3 years. Let me back up. I'm 31 years old. I run a mid-sized architecture and urban design firm that I started with $22,000, a sublease on a 2-room office above a dry cleaner, and no safety net of any kind. The firm now employs 43 people. We've completed projects in 9 states. Last year, we were shortlisted for a National Design Award that I used to dream about when I was drawing floor plans in the margins of my high school notebooks. My family didn't speak to me for 4 years before that day. They walked through my door. 4 years, 2 months, and about 11 days to be exact. Not that I was counting after the first year. The falling out happened at my parents' kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in late October. I had just turned 27. I had just quit a perfectly stable job at a large firm downtown. Good salary, good benefits, the kind of job my mother described to her friends with visible pride, and I had just signed a lease on that tiny office above the dry cleaner. I came to tell them. I thought, maybe naively, that they would be cautious but supportive. I thought they knew me well enough to know I didn't do things impulsively. My father put down his fork and looked at me like I had announced I was joining a cult. My mother said, "You're throwing away everything we sacrificed for you." My brother, who was 24 at the time and had never held a job for longer than 8 months, said, "I always knew you were selfish." The conversation deteriorated from there. My father said that if I walked away from a real career to play architect on my own, I shouldn't expect them to be there when it fell apart. My mother cried. Not the sad kind, the kind designed to make you feel like a criminal. My brother sat back in his chair with his arms crossed, and the quiet satisfaction of someone who had been waiting a long time to watch me fail. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. Then I went inside, opened my laptop, and got back to work. The first year was genuinely hard. I'm not going to romanticize it. There were months I paid my employees before I paid myself. There were nights I ate cereal for dinner because I'd forgotten to buy actual food, and I was too tired to care. There were projects I didn't get, clients who went with a bigger firm, bids I lost by margins that made me want to put my head through a wall. My father called once, in the spring of that first year. He didn't ask how I was doing. He asked if I was ready to be realistic. I told him I was in the middle of something and I'd have to call him back. I never called back. Neither did he. My mother sent a card at Christmas with a short note that said she hoped I was eating well and that there was still time to make better choices. I put it in a drawer. My brother didn't contact me at all, which was honestly the easiest part. By year 2, the firm had 5 full-time employees and a project portfolio that was starting to feel real. By year 3, we'd won a regional commission for a community center that got written up in 2 trade publications. I hired a PR consultant named Bex, sharp, organized, allergic to wasted time, who told me flatly in our first meeting that my firm was embarrassingly undermarketed for the quality of work we were producing. I liked her immediately. By year 4, the word had started to spread in the way that matters. Not press releases, but other architects recommending us, developers calling without having been cold-pitched, clients from our first small projects referring us to their networks. I was working 70-hour weeks, and I was exhausted in a way that felt entirely different from miserable. I was tired, and I was proud, and those are not the same thing at all. That was the year my brother looked me up. He sent a LinkedIn message which I found oddly formal for someone who had watched me grow up. The message said he was exploring opportunities in the design space and thought it would be great to reconnect. I read it twice, set my phone face down, and went back to the proposal I was drafting. A month later, my mother called. I was cooking dinner. Pasta, nothing special. And I stared at her name on the screen for a full 4 rings before I answered. She said she'd been thinking about me. She said she hoped things were going well. She said she'd heard the firm was doing nicely and that she always knew I had it in me, which was so far from anything she'd actually said, that I had to press my lips together to keep from laughing. Then she said, "Your brother has really been growing a lot. He's been studying project management. He'd be a real asset to a firm like yours." And there it was. I told her I had to go. The pasta was boiling over, which was true. But that was just the beginning. Over the next 6 weeks, the messages escalated. My father called twice, both times eventually steering toward the same topic, which was that my brother had matured a lot and had real leadership potential, and that it would mean a lot to the family if I brought him in at a meaningful level. When I asked what meaningful level meant, my father said, "He should be a partner. He has the family name, and that stands for something." I was quiet for a moment. "Which family name is that?" I asked. "Because the firm is named after a Clover, not our last name." My father didn't find that funny. The ask got more specific after that. My brother wanted a senior position, not entry-level, not junior, not even mid-level. Senior. With a stake in the business. When I pointed out, through my mother and one of her relaying the message calls, that he had no architecture background, no design experience, and no licensure of any kind, the response I got back was that he was a people person and could handle the relationship side. I had 43 employees. I had a director of client relations who had been with me since year 2. I had systems and a team and a culture I had spent 4 years building with enormous care. I told my mother I'd think about it. I did not think about it. I thought about other things. I thought about Bex, and something she had mentioned offhandedly 3 months earlier, a conversation she'd had with a property developer named Whitfield, who was assembling a portfolio of independent firms for a long-term civic partnership contract. A big one, the kind of contract that would anchor a firm like mine for years. Whitfield had been watching our work quietly. Bex thought we had a real shot. I thought about the fact that my brother's girlfriend's mother ran a small PR outfit that had, in the past, handled some reputation work for clients who'd needed it. I'd never interacted with them professionally, but Bex had flagged it to me once as a potential conflict of interest if we were ever in competitive bids. I'd filed that away and mostly forgotten it. I thought about how my father had, twice in our recent calls, mentioned knowing the owner of the building where my firm leased its space. He brought this up casually, as context, as proof of his network's reach. The building's owner was a man named Mr. Gould, who had purchased the property about 8 years ago and redeveloped it. I had met Mr. Gould exactly once, at a small gathering in the building's lobby 2 years earlier, and we had talked for about 20 minutes about urban design and community-centered development, and the way good architecture could change a neighborhood's relationship with itself. He had given me his card. I had sent him a follow-up email the next morning. We had stayed loosely in touch. I did not mention this to my father. I started preparing. I spoke with my lawyer. I reviewed the firm's partnership structure and confirmed, in clear legal language, what I already knew, that bringing on a partner without design credentials and without a meaningful equity contribution would expose the firm to professional liability issues, particularly given the licensed nature of architectural work. I asked her to draft a formal summary of these restrictions. She did. I spoke with Bex. I told her I thought something was coming. Not a smear campaign exactly, but pressure. She understood without my needing to explain further. We quietly documented the firm's recent press, our project outcomes, our client satisfaction metrics, and our standing with the licensing board. Nothing dramatic. Just a clear, organized record of what the firm was and where it stood. I sent Mr. Gould a note, nothing urgent, just checking in. Mentioned the Whitfield opportunity. Mentioned that things were going well and that I was looking forward to the next phase of the firm's growth. He wrote back the same afternoon and said he was glad to hear it, and that he had been following our work with admiration, and that if I ever needed anything, I should let him know. And then I waited. 3 weeks later, my parents and my brother showed up at my office. They arrived at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I had a board presentation running. My assistant came into the meeting room, visibly uncomfortable, and leaned close to tell me quietly that my family was in the lobby. I told her to offer them water and let them know I'd be with them in 15 minutes. They did not wait 15 minutes. My mother opened the meeting room door herself. My father behind her, my brother wearing a blazer that still had the fold lines in it from whatever packaging it had come in. My CFO stopped mid-sentence. 17 people in the room went quiet. My father walked to the head of the table, the end where I was standing, and set down a folder. He said in a voice designed to carry, "We need to talk about the future of this firm, and I think everyone here should hear it." I looked at the folder. I looked at him. I did not pick up the folder. I said, "Go ahead." He said the firm had grown because of the family's name and the family's network, both claims that were factually false, but delivered with complete confidence. He said my brother was ready to step into a leadership role and that resisting this would be a mistake you'll regret when you need us. He said he had connections to the building's ownership and to several of our municipal contacts, and that he could make things difficult if I chose not to be reasonable. My mother nodded at every point like she was watching a perfectly rehearsed play. My brother said, "We're not asking for much, we're family." I waited until my father was finished. Then I said, "Dad, can I ask, did you ever actually speak with Mr. Gould about this building?" My father said he knew Mr. Gould, that they'd had conversations, that Mr. Gould was a reasonable man who understood family loyalty. I said, "Let me call him." I picked up my phone and called Mr. Gould's direct number. I put it on speaker. He answered on the second ring. I said, "Mr. Gould, I have my father here with me. He mentioned that you two had spoken about the lease on this property. Could you tell me, has anyone contacted you about my building?" There was a brief pause. Mr. Gould said, "No one has contacted me. And I want to be clear, even if someone did, it would not change anything. Your firm has been an outstanding tenant and a remarkable presence in this building. I hope you stay for many years." He paused again. "Is everything all right?" I said. "It will be." The room was very quiet. My brother had stopped looking confident. He was looking at the table. I thanked Mr. Gould and ended the call. I picked up my father's folder and held it for a moment. Inside were some vague documents, a proposed family advisory structure, some language about equity, nothing legally coherent. I set it back down. I said calmly, "This meeting is over. I'm going to ask you all to leave." My father started to say something. I held up one hand. "I have a legal summary prepared by my attorney explaining exactly why the partnership arrangement you've described is not possible under architectural licensing law. I'm happy to have her send it to you, but that's not really what this is about, is it?" My mother said, "We're your family." I said, "You were. And then you told me I was selfish for building something. You didn't call for 4 years, and when you did it was to ask for a piece of it. I'm not angry about that. I'm just not interested." My brother said something then, something low and sharp, about how I'd always thought I was better than everyone else, how this was typical, how one day I'd need them and they wouldn't be there. I looked at him. I said, "You know what's interesting? I've been doing this alone since I was 27. I already know what that feels like. It didn't stop me then. It won't now." My assistant appeared in the doorway. 2 of my senior staff had quietly moved to stand near the entrance. My father looked at them, then at me, and something shifted in his expression. Not softening exactly, but a reckoning maybe. The realization that this was not going the way he had planned. They left. Not quickly, not with dignity intact, but they left. I turned back to my team. The slide was still on the screen. Q3 projections. 43 people in the room or nearby who had watched the whole thing. I said, "I'm sorry about that, let's keep going." And we did. What came afterward was less dramatic but, in some ways, more satisfying. My brother's girlfriend's mother reached out to 2 former clients of mine, I found out later through a contact who was friendly with both parties, and suggested, vaguely, that there were questions about the firm's financial management. It didn't go anywhere. We had clean audits, long-term client relationships, and a reputation that had been built slowly and carefully precisely because I had never cut corners. The whisper campaign, such as it was, hit a wall. 3 months after the office confrontation, the Whitfield contract came through. It was the largest commission a firm had ever received. It came with a 3-year partnership structure and the kind of visibility that opened 4 other doors within the first 6 months. Bex sent me a bottle of champagne with a note that said simply, "Told you." My father called once more, about 2 months after the office. He didn't mention the visit. He talked about the weather and asked if I was eating well. I talked with him for 4 minutes and said I had to go. My brother hasn't contacted me since. My mother sent a card at Christmas. No note inside, just her signature. I put it in the drawer with the others. People ask me sometimes if I wish things had gone differently with my family, if I wish they'd been supportive earlier, if I carry grief about it, if I hope for reconciliation someday. I usually answer honestly, which is that I don't spend much time on the question, not because I'm hard or cold, but because the answer stopped being simple a long time ago. What I know is this: I built something real. I built it without anyone's permission and without anyone's help, and without a safety net. I hired people I believed in and paid them well and made something that didn't exist before I decided to make it. My family looked at all of that and saw something to take a piece of. I looked at all of that and saw everything I'd been working toward since I was drawing floor plans in a notebook at 16 years old. There's a version of this story where I let the bitterness in, where I replay the kitchen table conversation, where I count the phone calls I didn't get, where I lie awake cataloging everything I did without them. I've visited that version. I know what it feels like. I don't live there. I live in my firm on the 4th floor of a building whose owner told me, on the phone in front of 17 witnesses, that he hoped I'd stay for many years. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. I think about that kitchen table sometimes. The way my father set down his fork. The way my brother crossed his arms like he'd already won something. What strikes me now isn't the anger I felt driving home that night. It's how clearly that moment revealed what everyone actually believed about me. And the strange thing about being underestimated by the people who are supposed to know you best is that it forces a kind of reckoning. You either shrink into what they've decided you are, or you get very, very quiet and get to work. I chose the second one. But here's what I've come to understand about the years that followed. Nothing I built happened because I was talented. Talent is common. What got me through the months of paying my team before paying myself, to the bids I lost and the clients who went elsewhere, and the nights I ate cereal for dinner and went back to my laptop anyway, that was something else. It was the decision, made over and over again in small, unglamorous moments, to keep going when stopping would have been easier. That kind of persistence isn't dramatic. It doesn't look like anything from the outside. It just looks like someone still at their desk at 11 o'clock. And the intelligence required to build something real isn't only the kind you learn in school. It's knowing when to prepare quietly instead of defending loudly. It's filing away a detail like who actually owns the building your father just threatened to use against you, and knowing when to use it. It's the difference between reacting and responding. My father walked into that board meeting expecting an emotional reaction. I gave him a phone call on speaker. The part I don't talk about as much is the moral weight of it all. Because there were moments, more than I'd like to admit, where I could have taken shortcuts, where I could have compromised a client relationship to land a contract, or let a team member carry blame that wasn't fully theirs, or built the firm faster by building it less honestly. I didn't. Not because I was noble, but because I understood early that a reputation built on solid ground is the only kind that holds when someone decides to dig underneath it. When my brother's connections tried to whisper doubts about our financials, there was nothing there to find. Clean audits, long relationships, a paper trail that told the truth. That wasn't luck. That was a daily choice, made in conditions where no one was watching. I think about Mr. P. Gould saying he hoped I'd stay for many years, and I think about the fact that I had met him exactly once, talked for 20 minutes about what good design can do for a neighborhood, and followed up the next morning like a person who meant what she said. That's it. That's the whole relationship. And it turned out to be the one that mattered most when my father tried to use a connection he didn't actually have. What you do when no one is watching becomes who you are when everything is. My family looked at what I'd built and saw something to claim. I looked at it and saw 43 people who showed up every day because I had given them a reason to. Those are not the same thing. They were never going to be. I don't carry bitterness about any of it anymore. Not because I've forgiven in some grand performed way, but because I've realized that bitterness is just another way of letting them take up space They stopped deserving a long time ago. I built something real. I built it right. And when the moment came, it held. That's the whole story.